This is the story of how you grew from the very first minute that you began. At the beginning of your life, you were too tiny for anyone to see. Your life actually began when a tiny little cell from your father, a sperm cell, joined another tiny little cell from your mother, an ovum cell. Your parents didn't even know it yet, but there you were. Even if we had had a strong enough microscope to see you, you wouldn't have looked much like you do now. But then someday when you're a grandma or a grandpa, you'll look a lot different than you do now, but it'll still be the same you. At the very first beginning, everything that you are today, you were already. Even though you were so teeny tiny, your body already knew that your hair would be blonde, but that yours would be red. It was already set that you were going to have a pug nose, but that you were going to have big feet. You see, nothing has been added to who and what you were at the beginning, nothing except food. Would you like to see yourself then?
See, you looked like a tiny dot of a pencil, but everything you are now, you were then. You just look different now. When you were about 1 week old, you attached yourself to the inner wall of your mother's womb. That's a very friendly, warm, and cozy place inside of her body. When you were only 3 weeks old, your heart began to beat. It is still beating now, and it will continue to beat until the day you die. About this time, your mother was pretty sure that you were actually growing inside of her. Probably in a week or two, she went to the doctor, who told her yes, she was going to have a baby, but she didn't know whether you were a boy or a girl. About this age, your brain began to work. Here's how you looked then. You were so tiny that your whole arm was smaller than a dime.
Here is the arm of a 6 weeks old baby lying on the back of a dime. Can you read the E pluribus unum? If we could have looked inside when you were 8 weeks old, we would have seen that your body was well enough formed so that you could swim freely, just like a regular swimmer, in the little bag of water that you lived in. If a very smart doctor with very special instruments would have been able to examine you then, he could have done the same electrocardiogram heart test on you that they do on big people. Would you like to listen to the way your heart sounded then? Let's listen. That was your heartbeat at 8 weeks.
Here were your feet when you were 10 weeks old. You were still so little that you could have stood on your daddy's little fingernail. But already you had a perfect little body, so completely formed that you even had fingerprints. At 11 weeks, you already could suck your thumb.
This is when you began to breathe. Since you were in a bag of water, you breathed the fluid in and out very slowly. You wouldn't breathe air, of course, until after you left your mother's womb. You see, at that time, your oxygen came through your mother. Attached to your little navel was what we call an umbilical cord. Do you remember how the astronauts were connected to their spaceship? Just like the astronaut got oxygen through his umbilical cord from the mother spacecraft, so you also got oxygen from your mother through your umbilical cord. You were a pretty busy kid then. Already you were able to swallow. Your stomach and intestines digested food from the fluid. You even urinated and had tiny little liquid bowel movements inside of your mother. When your mother would sleep, you would sleep. But when she would run down the stairs, or there'd be a loud noise, you would wake up, just like you did later after you were born and she held you in her arms. Doctors who do brainwave tests tell us that you were dreaming already. You were also sensitive to pain. For instance, if someone put a needle through the wall of your mother's womb and stuck you, you would recoil in pain. You were even able to learn things then. If people would sound certain signals and stick you after one, but not after the other sound signal, you would learn to know which one would hurt you, and you would dodge that one.
Here you were at 12 weeks, or 3 months old. You saw from the last picture how tiny you still were. Probably no one knew your mom was pregnant unless she told them, because she didn't show yet. Here you were at 3.5 months. Would you believe that you had 5.5 months of living inside your mother yet before you would come out? Your body was already perfectly formed, and all of your organs were working, but you had a lot of growing bigger to do yet. Here you were, 4 months old. You were getting bigger still, and now for the first time your mother began to feel you kick. She probably was wearing maternity clothes by that time because she was showing. Isn't it strange that she didn't feel you kick until then? Well, not really, because you had to be about 1 foot long and weigh a pound to be strong enough to kick her hard enough for her to feel it. She couldn't feel you any earlier, but in fact, you were kicking way back when you were only 2 months old.
Here is a little girl who was born just over 4.5 months old, weighed a little over 1 pound, but was healthy enough and had smart enough doctors and nurses to keep her alive. Here is the same little girl 3 weeks after she was born. See how tiny she still is? That's the nurse's wedding ring around her forearm. In this picture, she weighs just 1 pound. Not many babies will live very long if they come out of their mother's womb and are born this tiny, but some do.
Here is a little boy who was born when he was 4.5 months old. This picture was taken when he was getting ready to leave the hospital. And here he is, almost a year after birth, a perfectly normal, healthy little boy, as you can see.
Here is another little girl born at 4.5 months. And here she is when she was close to her 3rd birthday. When your mothers and dads were in school, babies this little couldn't live very long outside their mother's womb. In those days, you had to weigh at least 3 pounds at birth in order to be big enough to keep alive. Now some babies live after being born weighing as little as 1 pound. And probably when you get big and are a doctor or a nurse someday, you'll be able to save babies who weigh a lot less than that. You see, a baby really is completely alive from the very beginning. But as doctors and nurses and hospitals get smarter, they've been able to save them after birth earlier and earlier.
Here's a little baby who was born when she was about 6 months old. She weighed about 3 pounds. Have any of you ever seen a baby this tiny? How big were you when you were born? How old were you? Well, most of you were 9 months old when you were born.